Agenda
Yes.
says, agenda says 2024, 2023 for the year.
You're live.
I resent it
Oh.
today because thank you, Anna, our scribe, who is very detail oriented, and said, Kirsten. So I fixed it and resent it. It's always that change of year. I got it now, though. Okay, we are live streaming, and we're going to hit record. And the floor is yours, Stephen.
Is everybody in? Do we need to wait a minute?
Oh, yeah. Let me admit all. There we go. And we pin AJ as president to the top, except for he moved. Where'd you go, AJ? There you are. We pin you to the top. There we go. 7 o'clock. You're good to go.
Okay. This is the January 8th, 2024 meeting of the Oregon Country Fair Board of Directors. And we don't have any singing bowl. And so we're going to take a moment and everyone's going to think Om for just a moment. So it's self-motivated. You can begin now. And with that, we will come to order. I'll remind everyone, if you're not speaking and you're not on the board or one of the officers or me, please leave your camera off. Also, as I've seen a few times and I've heard from other people before, if you're picking it up and walking around, turn your camera off because some people get motion sick with all the waving around and the trying to focus. So we're going to begin with announcements. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand in chat. So I know there's at least one, and I'm waiting for somebody to raise their hand in chat for announcements.
Paxton raised his hand in his screen, which we discourage because it reorganizes the screen. But
AJ?
I will let Paxton go first. He was trying to get there.
He's got a chat hand. Go ahead. Go ahead, Paxton.
Sorry about that. Our other meetings, we're trying to use the raise hand thingy, and our committee meetings, I do like that. I think it works, but I agree that it doesn't work here. So I'll get rid of that. My announcement is actually for Yama and Pete. He's doing a birthday party for years he has done a musical event for a benefit on his birthday. This one's benefit is for Whitebird, and it's a week from Friday, January 19th, at World Pies, Cosmic Pizza. Doors open at 7, showtime at 8. And this is the second board meeting he's missed in 12 years. He's at bird band practice. So thank you.
Thank you. And AJ.
Yes, I just wanted to put a reminder out going into the new year for everyone to be safe. I think our community is experiencing a heightened use of drugs and alcohol during this time, winter, and fentanyl is killing folks. And it doesn't just affect one part of our population. It is affecting everybody, no matter who you are. So please be safe. Please take care of the ones you love, and try to help in any way you can.
Thank you. And Hillary.
Yeah, I just don't want it to get past this meeting without us acknowledging that Dennis Todd died during December. Dennis had been dealing with cancer for a long time and doing it courageously and cheerfully, and participated fully in path planning and a number of other committees. He had been a construction coordinator years ago. He helped his wife Jill when she was child care coordinator. He's contributed a lot to the lump manual. Just philosophically and energy wise, he's put a tremendous amount into the fair and been a great resource to volunteers and staff over the years. And we will miss him very, very much.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Are there any other announcements? Last call for announcements. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the minutes. we didn't get to implementing consent agenda, but this is a routine piece of business, so it's on the floor automatically. And my question is there any objection to approving the minutes as submitted? If anyone has a correction, go ahead, Sue.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. It's not a correction, but I will be abstaining as I had to leave the meeting early. Thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, is there any discussion or objection to accepting the minutes as submitted? Last call, hearing none. The minutes are approved with Sue abstaining. And for the record, since we haven't mentioned, we do have two excused absences of Tom Horn and Arna Shaw. So we have 10 board members here tonight. We're going to move on to the agenda. Is there any objection to adopting the agenda as submitted? Last call. Any objection to adopting the amendment as submitted? So the agenda is adopted by unanimous consent, and we will move on to membership comments. So are there any members with comments tonight? If any members want to make any comments tonight, please raise your hand in chat. Last call. Okay, seeing no member comments, we're going to move on to staff reports. Executive Director, floor is yours.
Yep. Thank you, Stephen. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed the holidays. It's great to see your faces. I'm looking forward to a fabulous 2024. To get started, we're going to start on the administration. The 2024 guideline change recommendations, both board policy and operational, are on the .NET site for review. Vanessa has put the link in the chat box for the location of them. They are also under the board motions document under the .NET calendar for the board meeting date. The board policy changes are in the January board packet and are listed under new business. The board will vote on the policy changes to the guidelines at the February 2024 board meeting. The 2024 board budget is close to completion. It will be presented to the board at the January 29th board special meeting. 2024 capital improvement requests from coordinators are due January 31st to the cruise staff liaison. There will be a coordinator budget and meeting on January 17th. So coordinators look for a notice on that on Monday of next week to remind you that it takes place next Wednesday. The board will approve capital improvement projects at the March 4th, 2024 board meeting. We held a database retreat this weekend at Alice's, and there is a database privacy policy in the board packet under new business and will be voted on at the February 5th board meeting. This is an essential piece of policy. It will enable us to get all data onto the servers in the Eugene office under one comprehensive database for the first time in OCF history. It will inform members, volunteers, artists, performers, and restaurateurs of the data we collect, why we collect it, their rights to privacy, and the measures we are taking to protect their personal data. We will begin taking credit card payments for crew inventory in 2024. Everyone that wants to pay with a credit card will need to log into the database and create an account and provide us with an email address. This is how everyone will be allocated inventory, and they will receive an invoice, or they will have a cart, a shopping cart, that they can pay for their inventory. We will still take cash and checks as per usual, but we are now offering this opportunity to pay directly with a credit card. No credit card data will be stored by us. It will be done through a third party, and that is PCI compliant. And as I said, cash and checks will still be accepted. We will ask the board for a work session in April to demonstrate the functionality of the database, and we will offer training sessions for coordinators in April as well. On the event management side, we have selected a new ticket vendor. The ticket vendor is Afton Tickets. That means we will no longer be using Tickets West. Tickets will be digital, i.e. on a cell phone, and will be scanned upon entry to the event. Ticket buyers can print the ticket themselves and bring that for scanning. We will offer a point of sale for tickets at the Eugene office on specific dates and times, which are to be determined and will be published as soon as finalized. So those are for people who don't use credit cards and would like to purchase a ticket with cash or check. They will be able to do that through the Eugene office. This is a response to a lot of requests for a ticket outlet in Eugene. Tickets West used to go through Safeways, and we lost that many years ago. So this will be an opportunity to buy tickets directly. Afton Tickets was the most competitive, and they bring a wealth of digital technology that will enhance our data around admissions. They are also an Oregon-based ticket provider. 2024 tickets will go on sale on Friday, March 15th, 2024. 3-day tickets will be offered for the first 2 weeks. These will be limited, but the quantity is not yet set. General admission early bird tickets will go on sale on Monday, April 1st through June 15th. These are what we considered reduced price tickets. General admission regular price tickets will go on sale on June 16th through the event. As I've mentioned before, the Spring Fling is set for Saturday, May 4th. Main camp will open on Saturday, June 8th, and the Teddy Bear Picnic is Sunday, August 18th. The site has flooded, so we encourage boaters to use life jackets and to stay away from the Long Tom, as the current is much stronger there. Please let somebody know that you are on site boating if you intend to do that. For marketing, fourth quarter merchandise sales were great. We sold over $6,000 in merchandise and placed additional orders for things that were really great sellers during the 23 fair. We also ordered some evergreen things that will always be for sale without dates. The 2024 poster is done, and it will be released at Spring Fling. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And moving on to Treasurer's Report, Hillary.
Yeah, I did on all the budget committee dates. And this is the time of the year when staff is closing out the prior year. So, paying all the bills, we'll figure out what ends up getting accrued and counted toward last year, doing reconciliations, getting all of our books ready to go to the accountant. And we pretty much wait until all the bank statements are reconciled. So probably this crew tends to work pretty fast, the current staff. So it could be that we'll be able to get everything ready to the accountant in February or March. We'll see. I'll keep you posted on that. A big local thing that some of you who don't live in Eugene might not be as aware of is that our local community newspaper was embezzled recently, and it's a huge shock and tragedy for the community, and it really affects us. And there's lots of talk about how did this happen. So it happens because there's a lack of internal controls, there's a lack of oversight, there's a lack of routine types of procedures that allow for checks and balances. And it's possible in any organization that it can happen. And it takes developing the systems that can catch it and the will to act when you see something. We have written policies. We have procedures that we do. When Kirsten came on board, we did a lot of updating of different procedures and cleaned some processes up. I have talked to accountants in the past about, possibly having them just review our internal controls. What we did most recently about our internal controls is submit an updated review of the expenditure side of all of our internal controls to the last accountant that we used to audit the SVOG grant. And so it's just the program grant, but it was large. It was $2 million worth of transactions, and they did testing, which is a standard thing to do. So to test to see that the controls that we were looking for were there. I would never say to any organization, go ahead and relax, everything is fine. It's always a work in progress. And I do have it on my to-do list to sit down with Kirsten and talk about, steps that might be appropriate right now in times of, heightened awareness that it's really important that we continue to maintain our internal controls. The internal controls is not because we don't trust people. Even people who who embezzle are trusted because that's how they got into the position. It's because we want to protect the people who are in the positions that there could be problems. And we owe it to each other, to the membership, to the public, to keep the organization strong and have it operate the way we say it's operating, and to not, allow for private inurement and, potentially huge damage to the organization. So I want to wish the Eugene Weekly well. I know they're putting in a lot of effort to get this straightened out, and I hope we'll continue to see them. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Hillary. And so we're on to committee and work group reports. There, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one tidbit to Hillary, and thank you for that eloquent statement, that the board only receives reconciled P&Ls, which means they balance to the bank statement. So just as a second layer of accountability, you only see truly reconciled bank P&Ls. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee and work group reports, they're supposed to be submitted in writing. Do we have any that need to be done in verbally? Okay, moving on to old business. The first order of business is a path planning committee appointment. Corey Cliff and Rosanna Costello being appointed to the path planning committee from Lisa Parker and Paxton Hogue. Who's making the motion?
I will. I move to appoint Corey Cliff and Rosanna Costello to the Path Planning Committee.
Okay. We can also just say, when I've read it out, you can just say so moved. So moved by Lisa Parker and seconded by Paxton Hogue. Is there any member input on the appointment to the Path Planning Committee? Any member input, raise your hand in chat. Last call. Any member input? Any board input? Do you want to make any statements, Lisa or Paxton, about the motion?
Sure, I'll say something. So both Corey and Rosanna have been attending and contributing to the Path Planning Committee for some time. They expressed interest in joining. The committee fully supports these appointments. And yeah, that's it. Paxton, did you want to add anything?
Go ahead, Paxton.
I also want to give kudos to both these people. They've been coming to meetings and being very active. And I really want to give kudos to Rosanna's mapping efforts. She has done some amazing work in mapping the fair site in quadrants that we can actually really use for planning. It's really wonderful to see her work. You can find it on the links to that on the Path Planning website. Thank you.
Thank you, Paxton. And so is there any other board discussion on this motion? Last call for any more board discussion. Hearing no discussion on the motion, I'm going to ask, is there any objection to the approval of this motion? Do we have this by unanimous consent? Is there any objection? Last call. Hearing no objection, Corey Cliff and Rosanna Costello are approved or appointed to the Path Planning Committee by unanimous consent. Our next motion is the Elders Committee appointment. Kay Kinsley. I think you got that right?
Yeah.
From Kevin Levy and John Steinhardt. Would you like to make a motion, Kevin?
Sure. I move to appoint Kay Kinsley to the Elders Committee.
Second. John, did you want to second it? Is that you?
I just did, I thought.
Okay, I couldn't. You got covered probably by me. Okay, moved by Kevin Levy and seconded by John Steinhardt. Is there any member discussion, any member input on the appointment of Kate Kinsley? Last call for member input. Hearing none, we'll go to board input, and I'm going to ask the people who made the motion first. Kevin, do you have any input on this appointment, or John?
Yeah, it was very unanimously and very excitedly moved to have Kay back. They're working on doing more in-person and hybrid meetings. She was having trouble with online, and she's a big value to the committee, so they're all excited to have her back. So she does a great job.
Did you have anything to add to that, John?
Nope, everybody wants her back, so let's do it.
Okay, Paxton,
He's a wonderful events coordinator for elders. I really appreciate her work. Thank you.
thank you. Is there any other board discussion on the appointment of Kay Kinsley to the Elders Committee? Last call for board discussion on the appointment. Hearing no debate on the matter, is there any objection to adopting Kate Kinsley's appointment to the Elders Committee? Last call for any objection. Seeing none, Kate Kinsley is appointed to the Elders Committee by unanimous consent. And we move on to the motion to create an ad hoc committee to make election recommendations, which is sponsored by everyone who is here and not here. So who would like to sponsor this motion?
I see my name is listed first. I don't know if that's alphabetical, but I'm happy to go ahead and so move this motion as written. It's a little bit long. Should I read it all, or are we
No,
good?
you're fine to just say, so, since I've read the title, just say so moved. And then
So
I will
moved.
ask for a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, so moved by John Alexander and seconded by Paxton. And then what I will do is I will ask, given the length of the motion and the fact that it is posted, is there any objection to dispensing with the reading of the motion? Last call, hearing no objection, we'll dispense with the reading of the motion. Yeah.
Sorry, I was having trouble putting my hand up. I do think it should be read.
Okay. Can we go ahead then? And John, would you like to read the motion to the board?
Ooh, okay, read out loud. All right, here we go. The board directs the bylaws committee and the election committees to meet as an ad hoc joint committee to consider and make recommendations for amending bylaws and policies to address elections issues, including 1, changing the method of selecting directors by election to direct ballot. 2, establishing a minimum age for OCF membership. 3, clarifying the election certification process and the effective beginning of terms of newly elected directors. 4, changing the voting participation requirement to count voting in any election versus only the annual election as fulfilling the requirement. 5, changing the petition signature requirement from a hard number to a percentage of members voting in the last election. 6, setting a time limit to submit the required number of signatures for a petition. The joint committee will report back to the board by March 2024's regular meeting. And I will list the motion, the people sponsoring this is myself, Sandra Bauer, George Braddock, Paxton Hogue, Tom Horn, Anthony Jackson, Kevin Levy. Am I saying that right, Kevin? I've never used your last name before. Lisa Parker, Arna Shaw, John Steinhardt, Sue Theolis, and Teresa Vaughn.
Thank you,
You have
John.
to take that up with me later, Kevin. Sorry.
It's okay. I say Levy. It's weird.
Well, I think it's important the way you say it. It's probably right.
I guess so. Thanks.
Okay, so the link to the motions is posted in chat again for anyone at home who needs to take a look at them. And I do want to clarify, given that it's just read to everyone, that the bulleted list was not a directive to change those things, but to make recommendations. So this is to form an ad hoc committee to make proposals to the board. So anyone in the course of this discussion, I want that to be clear. And is there any membership comments on this motion? If any members wish to make comment on this motion, please raise your hand in chat. Heather.
So a question, are the meetings of this committee, which seems to be an incredibly short timeline, so I imagine really the recommendations are already decided, although that would be pretty incredible as well. But are they going to be open to the membership? Is membership going to be able to have any input on this?
Thank you, Heather. Are there any other membership comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to board discussion. And Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, first I want to assure Heather that these meetings are open to the membership. There's no reason for them to be closed. But I had two questions, which I'm sorry I didn't ask earlier, but in here it says that you can vote either annually at the annual election of the board of directors or other votes. What other votes are there?
So I'm gonna respond to that if I may. This is the time to take that up would be at the ad hoc committee. They would be talking about if you vote in, say, a recall effort or in a referendum or an advisory thing.
Right.
Anything else that's done by petition would count.
Right.
However, I don't want us to get into a dialogue. These are the things that should come up at the work group with that in terms of what the substance of those are.
Yeah.
Any other board discussion?
No, I had one other
Oh,
point.
go ahead.
Okay. And just to be clear on this, it says in the first part where it says make recommendations for amending bylaws and policies to address election issues, including, and just to be really clear, I would like to do a friendly amendment that says, but not limited to, because they're not limited to just the things that are suggested here, as I understand it.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And since everybody, I know that John Alexander made the motion, but everybody is like a sponsor of the motion. So we'll come around. I'm going to let AJ speak and then we'll address that.
Yeah, I think that when, especially as a board member, when I sponsor a motion like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't need work. Sponsorship doesn't mean that we don't do the work to make sure it's a great motion or something that we're going to adopt. What I would like to see is a longer timeline. I think the timeline is is a little bit too short for me. I think we are in the winter months, and it is important that the membership have time with this as well, and have and I think when we do stuff in the off season, like in the winter time like this, that is this big, that's going to have such a big effect, we have to take that into consideration. And so I think these are important issues for us to take up. But I do think that being really diligent about making sure that the membership has a clear understanding when we're making changes, if we make changes like this, and have time with it, is important. So when that meeting comes up or that work group comes up, that is one of the things that I'm going to be pushing with. I think we should have more than one work group in the winter. Maybe we have one this summer, but I don't know. I think there's a push to have this happen before the next election. And if that's what the push is, I think having two work groups on these topics would be important, and that's what I would advocate for.
Okay, so I'm going to ask. I'm going to take a moment here, and both of these changes that are requested are basically substantive, and I've wanted us to try and change how we're dealing with friendly amendments anyway, because there's some issues with it. So, and given that everyone is a sponsor, there really isn't a point person to go back to. So I'm going to come back to Sandra. I'm going to ask, can you just make a motion to amend this motion, and we'll see if there's a second for it. So can you restate what you wanted and just simply make that motion?
I move to amend it by adding the words, but not limited to, after including, so that it says policy to address election issues, including, but not limited to.
Is there a second?
Second.
Teresa, I saw raise her hand, so we're going to, sorry, Sue, but we're going to go give that to Teresa since she's got her camera on. So moved by Sandra Bauer and seconded by Teresa. Is there any membership input on this amendment? And I see you, Stephen, and I see Sue. I see Stephen, and we'll get back to you when we get to this. Last call for membership input on this amendment.
Thank you.
Seeing none, we're going to go to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on this amendment of adding the words not limited to? Hearing no discussion, is there any objection to the amendment?
My hand is up and I'd like to address that.
You like, well, okay, okay, go ahead, Stephen.
So, first of all, I don't have a problem with this at all. I thought that the word including implied that this was not limiting, but I think this is a fine clarification to that. So since I'm the one that initially wrote this motion and discussed it with the board members, I thought I'd make it really clear. That shouldn't be a problem at all. I think that's just a clarification. I don't think that actually substantively changes this motion. I think the word including in and of itself was non-limiting.
Okay, AJ, are you trying to speak to this?
Yeah, I agree with it. I would say this is even more reason why we should take our time with it.
Okay, well, we're going to come back because I want you to think about when you want that timeline to be, because that's going to be the next thing. So, last call for board discussion on this amendment. Hearing none, is there any objection to this amendment? No one has spoken against it. So is there any objection? Last call. Hearing no objection, the amendment is adopted by unanimous consent. And I'm going to come back to AJ now and say, can you just make a motion for the timeline that you would like to discuss with the board here?
I believe, I don't know, I guess my motion would be one that extends the work sessions to 2 instead of 1. And I would leave that to the committee to decide when those 2 would be scheduled. But I'd like to add an additional work group for these policies.
So I want to be clear of what you're saying here. You were talking about the time frame. Are you trying to change the time frame? You want to extend the date past the March?
Yeah, I think by adding an additional work group, it does change the timeline. It does the same thing. It adds more time.
Okay, well, I do not know what you mean by adding a work group, and I don't see a work group session on the motion here. I'm looking over trying to see what I'm missing.
So I thought I heard that in the reading of it.
No, I think it's just to form an ad
Work
hoc
session.
committee who can meet as many times as they need, right? Am I mistaken about that?
No, that's right.
Okay, so this is just to form a joint committee, an ad hoc joint committee between the two who can meet and have as many work sessions as they like. So public.
Okay, so that's where you're confusing me though, is that they can meet and have as many work sessions as possible. You mean committee meetings or work sessions?
Well,
because work sessions are different than committee meetings.
None of that is specified in this motion. So when I heard you talk about the timeline, and I really want to get away from dialogue here, do you want this to, do you want to extend the timeline? Do you think it's too short?
I do.
Okay, can you make a motion to that effect?
I think we should clarify. I move that we clarify, are these work sessions or committee meetings? If somebody who's putting,
It says to form an ad hoc committee, it says to form an ad hoc committee to meet. My recommendation to you, because it would be to consider making a motion to extend the timeline and put a requirement of how many, a minimum number of open work sessions they should hold. Right? Because it's not specific in this motion at all now. It's simply an ad hoc committee meetings.
As the motioner, can I ask for a clarification?
You can ask for a clarification, sure. Go ahead.
So as and I think this also relates to the membership comment. If this becomes even an ad hoc committee, it's open to the membership.
Mm-hmm.
So that's already assumed. So I appreciate, I think it was Heather who made that comment. And then number two, There's nothing about work groups in this or work sessions at this point. So we're getting confused a little bit into what's a work group or what's a work session. This is an ad hoc committee that would meet and announce meetings, and those meetings would be available for the membership and the board to participate in. And as it reads now, just to clarify. And so that's where we stand now. So we could extend the date as Stephen's trying to do, or we could specify that there were public work sessions like we have on Mondays or whatever those are, which would be a separate addition and amendment to this if we wanted to specify that. But as it stands now, it's a date of March to come back to us. And that doesn't mean it's the final time they come back to us. They need to come back to us at least in March. And if they want to have public work sessions, that's great. But what this does assume is that committee meetings will be announced and open to the board and the membership.
Okay, so to clarify a couple of those things then, John, one is I do not know that we are clear that all meetings of committees are public. In fact, we said no to that not too long ago and I believe we still do not have an official process for not having a public meeting. So
that's not right.
What?
That's not right. The committee meetings are open unless it's a closed meeting, and there's guidelines for having closed meetings.
And did we adopt guidelines for having closed meetings? I might be confusing too. There was a lot of debate about it.
Right.
There are relic or best practices guidelines around closed meetings that have been passed.
But all committee meetings are open.
Okay. Correct. So that would make these open as long as people can find out about them. It would still be possible to require a certain number of public work sessions, but I don't know that that's necessary. But I'm trying to keep us from devolving here and just get focused on this motion. Are we going to change the timeline? And if so, AJ, what we should do is just discuss that. So do you have a time that you would like to propose, AJ, or should we move forward with the motion as it stands?
Yeah, I just don't see how March turnaround. We're already in middle of January.
So I'm asking you though.
So I'm gonna propose that they come back to us in May. Instead of March.
Okay.
Yes.
And while I hear what was reported about doesn't have to be final, you could also consider language that says report on progress to make it clear that it doesn't have to be final if you stick with March. But AJ's motion is to change it to report back to the board by May of 2024, May board meeting of 2024. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Moved by AJ and seconded by Sandra Bauer. Is there any membership discussion? And I see some hands are up here. I'm going to go to membership and then come back to these folks. Is there any membership discussion on changing the date? Changing the report back date to May. Last call. Hearing none, I'm going to come back to board discussion, and I believe, so as I'm looking down here as to who's raised their hand since this, because it got a little confused. Paxton, did you need to speak to this at this point?
Yes, I'll speak to the motion or the amendment. I would prefer to keep the original timeline just because I think it will get us towards getting results by election time. It doesn't. I personally believe that as a joint committee meeting that we'll get our work done and that it will then we'll have to have probably some sort of board work session on it as a normal Monday board work session. I would think we would want to do that as the results of the joint committee work gets done. So putting the initial report off till May turns a work session until later in the year, and I would rather keep the initial timeline and move forward more quickly on this. Thank you. If we publish our meetings, we're going to have many people attend.
Okay, Lisa Parker.
I had my hand up before either of them.
Okay, well, yeah, I can't tell which time you had your hand up, Stephen. So go ahead.
I know, because we were kind of in the middle of things.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'll be fairly brief. I'm opposed to this amendment for the reasons that Paxton just stated. If we wait until May report back to the board, it's going to be August or September by the time this gets voted on, and that's too late for any of these changes to happen for this election. I think the committee needs to report back to the board in March. We may not have all of our work done in March, but we may have some changes ready for March, and we were hoping to get a board work session the third Monday of March in order to have a full 2-hour work session on this for member observation and participation, and then get it on the agenda for April. If we delay it beyond that, it's just nothing's going to happen in time for the election this year. So we don't have to get it all done, but I think that sticking to that March deadline for reporting some of the progress is really important if we want to make any changes at all this year. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa Parker.
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Paxton and Stephen just said and add that I really kind of like that suggestion of adding in report progress to the board by the regular March board meeting, because I think that sort of helps convey, the intention behind, what Stephen just said about how we may not have all the work done by then, but we can report on, what is, what has come together, what is ready to present to the board, request work sessions and things like that in March. So I would also favor not changing the deadline to May, but just maybe add in report progress.
Okay, well, that would be another, that would be a separate amendment motion. Going to Kirsten.
Thank you. This is probably already very well known already, but new business has to be to me. Any motions have to be to me, 2 weeks in advance of the board agenda being issued. So keep that in mind. So if it's just a report in March, that's one thing. But there's any actions that need to be taken, you're looking at them hitting the board agenda for April for new business and voting on in May. Thank you.
And Kevin.
Yeah, my initial question was, what was the latest we can get it into as far as trying to tighten up the deadlines? What it sounded like maybe we should shoot for April, as far as meeting in the middle, and then have it done. We can move it from new to old right in session, get it through. I definitely don't want to do the work for no reason and then we can't implement it. So I don't know if everybody's open to April or not, but definitely punt it to Stephen. I see he's got his hand up in case he's got something to put on there. Thanks, everybody.
And AJ.
As the maker of this motion, I just would encourage the board to know to just this is going to directly affect the membership and how we vote. And the more time that they have to participate in this process is important. And I know people have their agendas about when things get done and trying to get it done by election time, but that shouldn't supersede the membership's right to know that their voting process may be changed by this and have input, maximum input. So I would encourage you to vote for this. I would like it to not have to be so desperately in a rush to do this in the first place. But I think it is a compromise to give the membership a few months to participate in the conversations around this. I don't, it's going to directly affect them.
Okay, thank you very much, AJ. I'm going to go to John Steinhardt, who has not spoken on this yet.
Yeah, I am not in favor of the amendment. I think March is a fine time frame because sometime after March, somebody's going to have to draft a motion after the board looks over it. That's going to be introduced as new business, which is going to give the membership another month to comment on it before we actually vote on it. And I do think it's important to, I've been concerned for a number of years that we randomly choose what age people are eligible to vote. And I want to make sure that's done by the next election. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Stephen Dyerkoff.
I'll say first of all, we don't randomly choose when people are eligible. We chose a criterion and we've stuck with it, and that the age of that criterion has changed a bit. And I think it definitely needs to be decoupled from when people get a wristband, and that's part of what this motion is on. But what I was primarily going to address was I don't think that having the committee report back in April and then moving a motion from new to old during that meeting is appropriate. Moving something from new to old should only be done for something that's very time sensitive and critical. It's not a mechanism we should be routinely using just because we want to get something passed and we don't want to wait to get it passed. So I would, if it's going to get moved back to April, then it's going to be that's going to extend it by another month. I don't think that moving it from new to old compresses the time frame, giving a little more upfront time. I recall last fall there were some people in a board meeting that had some serious concerns about some of the issues we're addressing, and we're asking for changes in September for an election that was already beginning, and now we have people wanting to not make any of these changes until after the next election. That kind of puzzles me a little bit. I think we can work on some of these items and get a few things at least resolved before the next election. I think giving membership plenty of time to have input. That's why I'm suggesting we have a board work session in March. We haven't officially asked for that yet because this motion has not passed yet, so we do not have the ad hoc committee. I was hoping right after this passes that we would ask for that work session in March, and that would give the membership a number of committee meetings to attend and provide input on these issues, and also a full 2-hour work session at the end of March before it becomes new business in April. So this would be voted on in May if it becomes new business in April. And I would encourage you to reject this amendment, stick with the original time frame, knowing that we may not have everything finished by then. And I would hope we would get that work session if this passes. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, so two things. First, I think the timeline is a little ambitious. But I think that if the ad hoc joint committee is really organized and focused, they can come up with some good recommendations by March. And like Stephen said, not everything, everything may not be ready by then. And just having completed the revision of the bylaws recently, I know from direct experience that these things, the timeline is really unpredictable. You can set a target for when you want the work to be done, but your control over that is actually kind of limited. So I'm not terribly in favor of changing the timeline on this either. I think it's just fine the way that it is. Another thing that I'd like to point out, just to kind of hopefully quell some concerns that the membership may have, is that Article 10, Section 2 of the bylaws states that no amendment to Article 5, Section 6A of these bylaws pertaining to the voting rights of the membership may be enacted unless such an amendment is ratified by an affirmative vote of a majority of the membership. So, any recommendations that would affect that part of the bylaws, the board couldn't pass anyway. It would have to go through the membership. So just to hopefully that helps, clarify a little bit, that there are limitations on what the board can do in regards to that.
Okay. Remind us the motion on the table is to extend it to May, and let's keep the conversation should be around whether or not to change the time frame only at this point. Teresa.
Yeah, going to say a lot of similar things to what Lisa just said. I think that the bylaws committee, the joint ad hoc committee, can really hear AJ's concern and be really sensitive to that, but not have our hands tied that we can't get some of these critical things done in a timely manner. And both things can happen with the amendment without change, with the motion without change.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to John.
Call the question.
Okay, the question has been called for. Is there a second?
I would like to.
Well, hold on.
Point of order, I think.
So I suspect that there was only going to be one more person speaking, but call the question is non-debatable motion. Was there a second for the motion?
I seconded.
Okay. So we're gonna do a voice vote, and this is to end.
Can I have a point of clarity, please?
Yeah. Well, let me clarify
No,
it first, if you still need it.
Yeah, just a point of clarity. Point of clarity. As the
Yes.
maker of the motion, if I chose to withdraw the motion because it doesn't have a support, I made my point, and if I chose to withdraw, could I withdraw the motion at this point?
So technically speaking, the motion belongs to the group, and the group is the one who has to grant permission. Are you asking to withdraw the motion?
Yeah, it's clear to me I don't have the support.
Is that okay, Lisa, if I proceed with that? Is there any objection to having this motion withdrawn?
Not for me.
Last call. Hearing none. Yeah, you're okay with who's Sandra? You have no objection. Okay, so hearing none, the motion is withdrawn. We're back to the original language as amended. So it includes but not limited to. Is there any more discussion on this motion? Last call for any more discussion on this motion? Okay, given that we had some debate on this motion, we're going to go ahead and proceed to a vote and do a voice vote. So, Sandra.
I'm a yes.
George.
Yes.
Paxton.
Yes.
AJ.
No hard feelings, but I'm gonna say no.
Lisa.
Yes.
John Steinert.
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
John Alexander.
Yes.
Teresa Vaughn.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 9 in favor and 1 opposed. AJ voting no. Moving on, the next item of business is the board directs the executive director to undertake a swift strategic planning process for the OCF's EAB response. Lisa Parker and Tom Horn. So do you want to make that motion, Lisa?
I so move.
And is there a second?
Second.
I see Sue trying, so I'm going to give Sue credit. She had her camera on this time.
I couldn't unmute in time.
So moved by Lisa Parker and seconded by Sue Theolis. And I think before we go to member comments, since a lot of people probably don't know what the EAB response is, we should get some explanation on this motion. Is that going to come from Kirsten or Lisa? Who should do that?
I'd be happy to give a little introduction, and then
Okay.
if Kirsten would like to add to it, or anybody would like to add to it, that would be fine with me.
Go ahead.
All right, so I'm sure everybody has heard about the EAB, the Emerald Ash Borer, and I'm sure that many of us here in this space appreciate the potential existential threat that it poses to our event. And so I attended the work session. There was a board work session back in November on the EAB. And at this work session, there was a presentation about a structured planning process or structured decision-making process. Just a template, a proposed template that we could potentially use. But anyway, I listened to all the different speakers at this work session, and there are, many interested parties, many affected parties, and many experts in things such as forestry and land management and agriculture and ecosystems and all of that stuff. And it occurred to me that we have so many talented and knowledgeable folks who are already invested and involved in figuring out what we're going to do about the EAB. But what we don't have yet is a plan. And in order to come up with a plan, there needs to be a process to do that. And so that's where this motion came from, was just that I just kind of grokked that moment that, what is the board's role in this? And our role as the directors are to direct. And by directing the executive director to implement and coordinate this structured decision-making process, that we can get the ball rolling in a way that allows us to actually come up with a plan for how we are going to deal with the EAB. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not necessarily going to be one set of solutions or one set of plans. This is a process that I'm proposing here. And the outcome of this process, hopefully, will be options. What are our options? What different things can we do? There may be a combination of strategies we employ. And so the board would still retain responsibility for making those big policy decisions, but the process for the structured decision-making, that's an operational thing. And so it seems appropriate to me to give the ED the green light to go ahead and start working on this process. Now, I chose the word rapid strategic planning process because that was, those were the words used to describe the process during the presentation. And somewhere between when I came up with the motion and when it got put on new business, the word rapid was changed to swift. So I'm not really hung up on that word. Doesn't have to say swift or rapid. The main thing is that we have a structured decision-making process, that we have a central clearinghouse for all those ideas, that we have somebody who is coordinating all of those different pieces, all of those different interested parties who are all working to make sure that, we're not working at cross purposes. So that's all. I'm gonna be quiet now, and if anybody would like to add to that, please.
Well, I think what we want to do before going to member input is just for people to know what we're talking about. I think that's pretty clear now. So is there any member input? I see you, John. I'm going to take member input first. Is there any member input on this motion? If you have any members wish to have input on this motion, please raise your hand in chat. Jonathan Pincus.
Yeah, I sent the board a letter yesterday by email, and I hope you all got a chance to read it, outlining some proposed changes to this motion that would, I think, make it more comfortable with most of the membership's notion of how we're governed, and particularly around very substantive decisions. what's ultimately chosen as our options in this case could have the potential to dramatically change the nature of the Oregon Country Fair in the worst case scenarios. And so I encourage the board to make sure that ultimately, even though you may ask the ED to create the process and implement it, that this is ultimately a board controlled process and that it is open and transparent regardless of who's implementing it to the membership. Secondly, I encourage you to change the word swift to timely and add the word comprehensive after that to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I am going to ask for a friendly amendment, actually, should be a truly correct friendly amendment here of Lisa, simply for the sake of the same thing that I saw with it. I would like to see that EAB is actually just spelled out as Emerald Ash Borer. Is there any objection? Lisa? Any objection, Sue? Okay, so that doesn't substantively change the motion, and there's no objection to the friendly amendment. So it's simply going to say OCF's Emerald Ash Borer response, so that everybody knows what we're talking about. Is there any more membership input on this motion? Last call for membership input. Okay, hearing none, we're going to go to board discussion. John, you still want to speak?
Yep. Lisa, I was just wondering that there's some, I know I emailed you earlier today, there's a little bit of ambiguity in the wording here. So is this motion to essentially create the process for collecting member input and developing a response plan? Is this motion to develop the response plan? Is this to swiftly develop a plan or to have a plan to swiftly respond? And I think that would actually probably answer Jonathan Pincus's question if this is just to define the process by which we're going to engage people, which is mostly how I read it. Thanks.
So I'm going to say that the motion is as the motion states. I think it gives Kirsten the latitude to create this process as it stands now, unless guardrails are set up by this body on the on what it is that she's to do. So the way the motion reads, it says that she is to undertake a swift strategic planning process, which she has the latitude to determine what that looks like, unless you want to put any more criteria upon it. Any more discussion from the board? I see Sandra now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify with you, Stephen, how do we get questions answered without proposing an amendment to the motion? I mean, I think that, there's been a couple of times when people have wanted some clarifying information and there hasn't been the ability to directly access the makers of the motion to get the clarification. So I think part of this, do you want to use for that?
So ideally, a lot of these questions depends on where the question should fall, but in this particular instance, and that's why I said what I just said, if for someone to say that the motion means this or that beyond the words that are in the motion is not really binding. So if undertaking a swift strategic planning process is inadequate, then there needs to be an amendment to the language, not just somebody saying, oh, this will do more like this and that. Now, Lisa gave a very long description of what she thought this should look like, which seemed pretty compatible with the language and compatible with what people wanted, right? But it's still up to the executive director, what this process will look like. So if we need to say more about what this process will look like, then there should be an amendment put on the floor to do so.
Well, I think board members should have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions before they decide that that's really necessary.
Mm-hmm. So in this case, let's say, what question do we want to answer? If we want to answer what this process is going to look like, you can ask Kirsten what process she's going to set up, or you can add language to the motion that says it has to look like this. But just saying, do you understand what I'm saying? Just saying, well, I think it'll be like this doesn't mean that's what it will be like. Does that make sense? Because the language is very short. The language simply says to undertake a swift strategic planning process for the response.
You know, perhaps John could rephrase his question so that it is a clarifying question and he can get the information that he needs to move forward or not.
John or Lisa, do you have, I mean, do you have anything to address to this that doesn't go beyond the language in the motion?
I am not sure, because I was going to ask if I could suggest a friendly amendment to my own motion, that would hopefully address, John's, concerns.
Well, why don't you, if there's no objection, why don't you simply propose an amendment? And if it's straightforward enough, I'm losing a little, I got to keep track of the stack here. So this is becoming somewhat of a privileged conversation. That's what I'm trying to avoid. You're up next, Lisa. So why don't you just go?
Okay, great. I'm thinking of both Johns actually. John Steinhardt asks which John. So I would like to suggest striking the word swift and inserting the word timely and comprehensive. So it would say the board directs the executive director to undertake a timely and comprehensive strategic planning process for the OCF's Emerald Ash Borer response.
If that's a motion, I'll second it. Or if it's friendly, I don't have to.
Yeah, so given that it somewhat changes the substance of the motion, and hopefully it's not too controversial, why don't we take it as just a motion to amend from Lisa Parker, seconded by John. It's up on the table. So I would like some help keeping track of the stack for the original motion there, because it's moved on a little bit, and ask, is there any discussion from the membership about the current amendment to change it to timely and comprehensive?
Kirsten, are you gonna help him with the stack?
I think she's doing that.
Okay.
And I got a line I can flow back up on there. Jonathan Pincus.
Yes. If there could also, if the amendment could somehow include a clarification of the board's role in this process, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Is there any other membership comments on this amendment? Hearing none, we'll go to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on this amendment to simply change SWIFT to a swift and comprehensive strategic planning process?
No, timely.
Timely, excuse me. Timely and comprehensive. Did you have something to say on it, Kirsten? Just on the amendment at the moment.
No, I was just going to explain SWIFT, but this amendment is clarifying, so I have nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for any other board discussion. Seeing none, there was no debate. Is there any objection to the amendment as presented? Last call for any objection. Seeing none, the amendment is accepted by unanimous consent. So the motion now reads, the board directs the executive director to undertake a swift or a timely and comprehensive strategic planning process for the OCF's Emerald Ash Borer response. Okay. Now, I think coming back to, we're going to go back to the main motion in the stack. And I think the biggest thing here is, this is a motion. This is why the questions, I didn't want to turn into a long discussion about something that's not in the words. This is a motion that says a very broad mandate to the executive director who will create this process. So if there are specific criteria that people feel need to be included, we need a motion to add to the language to set up those guardrails. If somebody saying it will be like this or that, the only person that you could ask that really of is Kirsten, who can then make promises regarding that. So we go back up here. Where should I be at on the stack here? Should I be at John Alexander? John.
I think so. So John the third now.
John the third.
And so I appreciate I didn't it took me a bit to see the messages, but Jonathan Pincus, your input is valued and I appreciate it. I want to mention two things with regards to something I was going to mention before. If you go back to the EAB work session, you will see some details about what Kirsten might do specifically with regards to this planning process. Kirsten has reached out to me and asked me to participate in this planning process in a substantive way, which I would be honored to do, and it fits into some of my expertises in conservation planning. So I just wanted to put that out there on the table as a board member. That would be an additional and different kind of role that I would play at Kirsten's request. And then I think that with regards to the board approving any kind of policies around a plan that might come out of this, or whatever the results are that come out of this, this motion as it stands gives the flexibility to start a process and begin to move forward with that process. So with that being said, I have one more friendly amendment or true voted upon amendment that I think would maybe cover that and cover two more of some of the concerns that have been raised.
Well, what amendment do you want to make? And let's just talk about them as amendments here. Hopefully not too controversial.
Okay, so it would read, what I'm adding here is to include a process that includes OCF community and expert input to inform OCF's EAB response. So the EAB response would still need to come back to the board for approval or anything like that, especially major response. So I don't think we necessarily need to say that. This is a planning process that will inform our response. It won't necessarily approve our response, and it won't necessarily, direct our, initiate our response. It would inform the response. So that with the friendly amendment, it would read as such: the board, directs the executive director to undertake a timely and comprehensive strategic planning process that includes OCF community and expert input to inform OCF's Emerald Ash Borer response.
Okay, I'm going to take that as that's a substantive change. I'm going to take that as a motion. I think that addresses, and this is where we're really trying to come. That addresses a requirement on what this process has to look like, which is what we're trying to get to. Is there a second to this motion?
It doesn't need to be a motion if the maker of the original.
I realize, but we're trying to get away from friendly amendments, changing things without other people having an opportunity to object. Is there, if everybody agrees with this, we can simply move through it efficiently. Is there a second to the motion? Anyone? Pretty sure. Okay, so Lisa Parker seconds. Moved by John Alexander, seconded by Lisa Parker. I'm going to catch up to where we are here. And down. Is there, so the motion is to include the language regarding membership and expert input. Is there any member input on this motion to amend? Last call for member input. If any members want to make input on the motion to add community and expert input, please raise your hand in chat. Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to board discussion. And AJ?
I think we're overcomplicating this, and I think that it gets a little bit micromanagey. And I understand people want to have their say so, but I think we talked about this in the past about just how we go forward in trusting each other's work. I I don't think this is a necessary thing. I like the one before this amendment. I just think we get in the weeds when we start directing specific little things instead of trusting our executive director that to do these things automatically, work with membership, work with experts. That's a given. Yeah, and because it's coming back to the board, and I think it's if the executive director does not do those things, it's our job to then go to that executive director and say, we need you to do these things as well.
Thank you, AJ. So we can go ahead and put that up if you want, Kirsten, and maybe you can highlight what this amendment is adding to it. And is there any other board discussion on the motion? And I can't see the chat now, so I got to bring that back up. Any more board discussion on this amendment? And
I don't know if it needs to be the exact words that I use. That's close, but this is fine. I said the process that includes OCF committee and expert input. But that's fine too. It means about pretty much the same. Great, thanks.
Okay. And last call for any board discussion on this amendment. Hearing none, is there any objection? Well, AJ objected. We'll take a vote. So on the amendment, Sandra.
I'm a yes.
George.
No.
Paxton.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
AJ.
No.
John Steinhardt.
No.
Sue Theolis.
Yes.
John Alexander.
Yes.
Teresa Vaughn.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
So I have 7 yeses and 3 nos. Is that confirmed? So that passes. So the motion as amended, and we're back to the main motion on the floor as amended. Is there any more discussion on the motion to set up the for the executive director to set up the strategic planning process? Go ahead, Paxton. I can see your hand.
Thank you very much. I want to say I've come to the realization that we actually need 2 plans. One for the inevitability of the Emerald Ash Borer appearing on our site. And the other one is if we discover the Emerald Ash Borer on site, which means we're going to have to be moving quickly. So I'm really fully in favor of leaving this to Kirsten's work. She's the executive director, and I think that is really primary part of her job description, in a sense, is to make sure the fair survives. So I'm happy with this motion the way it stands. Thank you.
And so I see AJ, did you just raise your hand?
Yeah.
Okay, speak.
Yeah, Mike, it's just my concern is that who considers themselves experts and things like that in this motion. It's it broadens it so much that it's like people are getting will get offended if they're not considered an expert. And we just direct it. Is this a person that Kirsten just gets to choose who the expert? Like, instead of just allowing her to do her job, we've now micromanaged it into like the unknown, I think. And it's frustrating. That's all.
Any other discussion on this motion? Kirsten.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, AJ. I do appreciate your concern. I don't mind clarity in motions. and I have the greatest intent to involve the OCF community and as many experts in various areas to participate that are part of this process. Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Kirsten if you could give us another minute here. A lot of the question about trying to get clarity on what this is going to look like, I've resisted some in terms of the words in the motion, but the words in the motion delegate a job to you. Can you take a minute to just describe your vision for what this strategic planning process will look like, and then people will know, have some sort of verbal commitment of what the obligation is out of this motion?
Yes, thank you. So I will be working with OCF community and experts to create a task force of sorts, work group, whichever you would like to call it. They will be open to the membership. They will be published on the .NET site. Excuse me. And we will go through a structured strategic planning process that John Alexander and a professional person that he works with who will also help facilitate that. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on the main motion here from the board? Last call. Hearing none, we're going to go to the main motion as amended. And we're going to go ahead and go down the voice vote. Kevin.
Yes.
Teresa.
Yes.
John Alexander.
Oh, no. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Somehow I froze. Yes. Thanks. Sorry.
I thought I heard you say no. I would have been surprised.
No, I said, oh no. That was probably a bad thing to say. All right.
Sue.
Yes.
John Steinhardt.
Yes.
Lisa Parker.
Yes.
AJ.
Thank you for clarifying that, Kirsten. Yes.
And Paxton.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. As amended. And with that, we're down to new business. So we're looking for a presentation from the people who are making these motions on the pending business. Is that the intent? Anybody?
I think that if anybody, I sure would hope we would do that. That's something we've discussed. I don't think we've made it official policy, but I think working these motions the way we did today lends more support for having a little bit of discussion about the new business.
Well, and it was brought up to me just before we started this, and if we're trying to keep on our time frame, what I think makes most sense is who is the sponsor, primary sponsor for the guideline policy changes? Who is the point person? Is there a point person? Because I see a couple people raise their hand. Paxton, do you want to take 3 minutes to describe what these are?
Yes, I'm not sure.
Well, be succinct. We don't need all the details, just if we can get a gist.
You're muted, Pax.
You muted yourself there. Oh, you muted yourself again.
Every year, and people submit them, and then they get published in the Fair Family News, and that's this back.
You muted yourself again.
Muted again, Paxton.
All right.
Oh, sorry. I'm leaning on my keyboard.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure out how to do that. Anyway, just a second. I got a little confused here. I really recommend people go look at the changes on the .NET board working document section, which is where this will, I'm sure, be up. There's about 20 some pages to this, it seems like. So I don't necessarily want to read each and individual ones. Basically, the process is that we publish these so that the Fair family can look at them. If they have any problems or concerns, for them to communicate to their board members what they might like to bring up. When we vote on this in March, is it March?
February.
February. If we often, some years we vote on them entirely if there's no objections. If there's minor objections, we'll vote on the majority of them as a whole. And then people could say what ones they have concerns with, and we can discuss individuals or pull individual guidelines out as needed. In general, most of the time it passes as a whole. So there's very little quibbling about it, but it really takes reading in detail. About half of these are operational changes, and about half of them are recommended by the family through our regular guideline process. So I really encourage the family to go read the guideline changes and let your favorite board member, any of your board members, know if you have concerns, because and then we will try and address that in the meeting where we adopt them. I hope that's okay.
Where do we see those changes online? Where can people read those?
I believe it will.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Okay, so they are on the .net site. They are listed in the board motions document. There's also the operational ones, which will not be voted on, but are published just so everybody can see them. Vanessa has just put up the link to where you can find the policy changes that the board will be voting on, and the operational ones that are just being undertaken as an operational course of business. Thank you.
Thank you. And what I'm going to ask for is, when this comes up next meeting, we're going to consider them all a single motion, and board members will ask to separate any ones that they want to discuss. If there's anyone, so if you all review it, and if you have any issues with any one of them, that will be a matter of asking to separate them. Go ahead.
There are policy recommendations in there that is a or situation. You would vote for one or the other.
Okay, so that'll have to be separate.
Yeah, they have to be separated. It's, are we going to do refunds or aren't we going to do refunds? And they're written differently so that you can see both sides of the policy, whether it is, yes, we give refunds, this is what it looks like, or no, we don't give refunds, this is what it looks like. And there are a couple of those in there.
Okay, well, let's separate those off the top and group the rest, and then everyone just come ready to be able to say, or even in advance, let us know if we need to separate any of the other ones for individual discussion. Do you want 3 minutes on the privacy policy, John?
No, I probably want about 30 seconds.
Okay, we'll take it.
Do we want to okay, so basically we have a motion where the board approves replacing the current data privacy policy with a new policy. It's long, so go look for it on the website. You can find it by going to the calendar entry for this board meeting and going down the motions for that. I had a lot to say about it, but Kirsten said almost all of it. So the two things I want to say that she didn't cover are, one of the main reasons we're doing this is because with taking money online and increasing the connection electronically between the organization and its membership, we're no longer having just a few hundred people log into a FAIR website anymore. It's probably going to be 10 or 20,000 people. So we need to really think about what we're doing. And also, I'm sure everybody has, if anybody reads privacy policies out there and gets disgusted by what they get from their cable provider, we're trying to be better, and we've put a lot of work into coming up with a policy that meets the organizational needs and also meets your needs for privacy. So that's it.
Thank you, John. And I will also point out, if people go take a look at that in the motions, that there is a summary of key points So before, don't be afraid to go in there and at least get an idea of the summary of key points on the pending motion. If people want to stick around and talk about the new motions more after the meeting, that's something we could probably facilitate, but we should probably move on at this point. Meeting evaluation. And anyone? And I see Hillary.
Yeah, thanks. Stephen, I think part of what you've brought that is a real strength to your facilitating is consistency and being familiar with Robert's rules and, providing a structure. However, this is hard for me to say. I feel like it's very difficult to distinguish sometimes between content and process. And up to this meeting, I felt like you did it really well. And there's a few times this time, I felt like you got way too engaged with kind of driving the meeting, driving the content. I've never seen a facilitator suggest a motion. The board, it's been up to the board to figure out their solutions. And things like Paxton said exactly where he did say where to go find the guidelines, and then afterwards you question him. I think you need to be careful to not drive too hard and get into content and lead. You're there to facilitate the board, not to direct them and lead them. And I don't want that to be discouraging. I want that to be to, for you to digest that, because I do feel like you've brought important strengths to the board and are helping them to function better than they have in a long time.
Thank you, Hillary. And I raised my hand to the point. We're working on part of my issue has been that there's some other process questions which, without them, I'm trying to keep it from devolving into a dialogue that doesn't lead us in a direction towards coming to decisions. And so, in particular, with this, I don't think it was inappropriate to ask to expand EAB to Emerald Ash Borer. That's a pretty common chair sort of thing to do to make sure the motion is clear. But with regards to the Sanders issue and asking questions, I was trying to find my way through that a little bit, because what I'm trying to avoid doing is having a big dialogue discussion that is not really binding about, and trying to find the path towards what's the right, who to talk to, what's the right question to say, this is the result you want to get. So in that case, it really should have been having Kirsten have time to say, this is what she would set up out of that motion, because the language is brief and it's delegating to her. So if you really want to know, well, what's this going to look like? It's the person you're delegating to who needs to respond to that. And it took me a little bit to come to that. I hope that was helpful. Other than that,
thank you, Stephen.
My best to try and structure and keep it from because keep people on point, because that's one thing that we have to struggle with, is not talking about other subjects other than what's on the floor. John?
Yeah, thank you so much. I do want to thank you for your keeping us on point and keeping us focused on the question that is on the table. I think you've been doing a really good job with that piece of it. One thing for us to consider, and I know on our docket, is the agenda, and I appreciate the way the agenda is flexing and you all beforehand leaving time for discussion of the new business. One recommendation I would have is on some of these topics that maybe we structure the agenda a little more, so we knew Kirsten and or others were going to speak to some of the motions and stuff like that, and maybe some of that can be outlined in a more outcome oriented subtopics as we get ready for member input, and then board input. And lastly, I think that in that thinking about how we deal with the agendas, thinking about how we respond to the important member input that we get and where we make space for that in our agendas, because we really appreciate everyone's input and taking the time and care to be here and to write to us and whatnot. So making sure that we do have time somewhere, somehow, to make sure that we are responding to our members. Thank you so much. Great job again, Stephen, and everybody.
Thank you, everyone. LT.
Hi, thanks. I tuned in a little late, but I did catch a point in the meeting in which there was a friendly amendment offered, and the procedure which has served the board so well for decades was not followed. And I was a little surprised. I wasn't sure whether I had missed something and the board had decided to abandon that particular procedure and that was a decision of the body, or whether that change had occurred in some other manner. But I would urge you to consider the utility that procedure has provided in allowing movements to develop their motions in real time with the collaborative input of their colleagues on the board. And it seems to me it would be a loss to the process to see that scuttled. So I hope that you all will reconsider that.
Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to say there's some questions that have come up in the meeting evaluation about the meeting process and specifically about the agenda. And I just want to remind everybody, we do now have a board rules committee that will be addressing issues like this and making recommendations to the board for any changes. We're working on finding a monthly meeting date right now. We hope we have that nailed down really soon. We will publish it as soon as we have it. And I would just encourage board members who are not on the committee and membership to attend those meetings and give their input then, because we're actually going to be developing some guidelines that, as far as changes in the way our meetings are structured, that we're going to recommend to the board to pass. And that would be a really good time to discuss those. Thanks.
And I just put my hand up just real quick to respond to LT with there's some other issues around the way friendly amendments are used. I would dispute whether it served the board well over time, particularly in terms of devolving into a dialogue or getting off subject, and also whether or not it's actually fair in terms of hearing everyone and their opinion on a change to a motion. And so previously I did set to not make it privileged, meaning if there's other people on the stack, they get to speak before the person looks at the friendly amendment. And then we've been talking a little bit about substantive changes. And so what I was hoping is that we take a look at it and say, if somebody wants a change and they just make a change to the motion, what we've seen is we can have a pretty efficient conversation in it, which ends up taking about not more time than the friendly amendment dialogue conversations, because they end up becoming dialogues between people. So that's on me. That's what I'm trying to get us a little more accustomed to. And I'm hoping that it won't be onerous or feel like we've abandoned something valuable, but time will tell, and maybe some rules conversations will help over time. So that's on me. That was me doing that. Thanks. Any more meeting evaluation? Last call. Special board meeting is the 2024 budget is Monday, January 29th, 2024 at 7 p.m. via Zoom. Next board meeting is Monday, February 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m. via Zoom. And AJ, President's Piece.
All right. I think it's poignant that I have a little quote for you that some of you guys have heard before, and that is good, better, best. Never let it rest until the good get better and the better get best. We are a work in progress. And I would also like to spend just a minute saying that when I came to Eugene, it was clear that there were a few organizations that all started in the 60s and 70s, early 80s in our community who most are struggling right now to stay alive. And one of those happens to be the one we talked about earlier, and that is Eugene Weekly. I encourage you to support them. They are not just because they are a business, but because of what they mean to our community. If you have an opportunity to lend your support to the Eugene Weekly, please do so. It not only affects the Oregon Country Fair, what's happening there, but it affects all of Lane County. And so Please show your support for the editors there, your support for the folks that had nothing to do with the issue that they're facing right now, that work every day, and I saw it personally, work every day to give us great information and to celebrate our local community. So hats off to Eugene Weekly. Please go out and support them. Have a great evening. Thank you.
So as we come to that's the end of the agenda. As we come to adjournment, is there, and I don't know if I'm, Kirsten, let me know if we can't do this or not, but is there any reason that there could not be, if people want to stay and discuss the new business for next month, they can do so outside of the meeting confines? And are there people that want to do that?
You have to officially adjourn,
Yeah.
and then yes, you can then leave the meeting open until 9 o'clock. But it'd be unofficial. Thank you.
That would be what I would suggest we do. The meeting is hereby adjourned. Are there people who wish to stick around and talk about new business?
I can answer questions on the privacy policy if people are interested, but I'd go read it.
Some people
first.
are leaving, but I'm happy to stick around and facilitate if need be. I see Paxton raised his hand, so why don't you just why don't you go first, Paxton? Or did you mean to? His camera's off. Is there anyone else who wants to ask any questions about the guideline changes or the privacy policy? Teresa?
I did email my questions already, but since we're going to have this moment, I can just ask them. In the guideline policy changes, at the beginning, things are highlighted that are different, but I can't tell what's different in the question about the noise. Like, what is the change that's happening exactly in the amplified sound? It's not clear to me.
I can try to answer that. There's two changes. One is just removing some archaic, well, three actually. One is removing some archaic language, which is that I don't really think we need to be banning tape recorders anymore because I don't think anybody has them. I didn't like the language banning battery powered radios because of course we use them for security at the fair. And lots of people bring walkie-talkies, and that's really not what we're banning. I expanded the language to make it clear, hopefully more clear as to what we mean by amplified music, that it includes your car stereo boom boxes, boom box backpacks, that sort of stuff. One of the reasons I put that in is that if it's in the guidelines, we can think about making people check that stuff at the gate. I've gotten complaints from a number of people who have had performances interrupted by people walking through in front of their stage with a boombox blaring. So I kind of like to not see that happen. And then finally, there's a change to make the amplified sound permit system proactive and reactive. We kind of have this thing of like, yeah, it'd be good to get a neighborhood agreement, but mostly our sound amplification permit stuff is reactive. We have something loud, it goes too late, people complain, and then maybe something happens the next year. So there's basically a change that says, rather than you ought to have a neighborhood agreement, it's like you need to have a neighborhood agreement or you're not going to get an amplified sound permit. Because I don't want to shortcut that.
Can I ask another? So are you saying that if we want to do amplified sound, everyone around can say no and therefore we can't do it? One person can say, no, I'm not going to sign a community agreement?
I'm going to leave that open to interpretation because I don't think I could spell that out quickly. I think, what I'd like to see is some level of consultation with people in the acoustic footprint. And of course, a smaller acoustic footprint makes it much easier to get an agreement. But, for example, I've had some people email me and call me saying, we camp out up by the screen tent and we can't get our kids to sleep because of the noise on the front porch. So one of the things that tells me is that the front porch is so noisy that there's thousands of people in that footprint And maybe that's not a great place to give a permit for something that loud. And I actually spent some time talking to Megatron, who's the bum that deals with these, about the fact that the front porch is a venue that really doesn't have much in the way to absorb the sound from it. And maybe that's not the greatest place for things as loud as they've been the last few years. Because I was basically asking the question, how come I can be at main stage and walk back to where the recycling bins are and barely hear the band, but people are complaining about hearing the front porch a mile away? And some of that has to do with the acoustic footprint and, you know, the decibel levels and how far that sound travels. But yeah, I guess I'm leaving it to other people to work out, but we've had the neighborhood agreement, part of it in there. It just hasn't kind of been a requirement. It's been a suggestion and people haven't done it.
So I want to be sure we spread it around here, and John Alexander and Kevin both have something to say, and I'm not sure who's best to respond to some questions on some of these guideline changes. John?
Well, I just want to respond a little bit. I think that Teresa brings up a really good point. So in the light of discussion, and I'm not sure if this is just question and answer, but you know, there's going to be a lot of, these are tough conversations, and John Steinhardt and I have had some of them, and you know, as a dweller of the Southwoods, where things can get quite noisy late night, without when the amplified music is done. I remember writing a letter one time in the lyrics of the Grateful Dead talking about how when the amplified music gets unplugged, that's when my kids wake up back there, and nobody wants to hear a screaming kid more than they'd like to hear some camp rocking out with a great band. So I think acoustic footprint's important. I guess my question then would be, is there some sort of a way of understanding traditionally what are some of the parties and late night amplified music parties that have been permitted, and ensuring that they don't run into issues around some of this, the kind of the question that Teresa mentioned, like one neighbor saying, oh yeah, we know you've been doing that rock party, you know, for 20 years, but now there's some neighbors who don't like it anymore. And as we change and age and other things like that, I'm just wondering curiously about those thoughts around it.
Kevin?
If you're asking that as a question to me, really, I don't think we're changing much in the policy, except to try to be a little more proactive instead of reactive.
Sounds good.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, that was kind of my question too, was really about like, how do we, you know, what's security's role in all this? I guess is like, we've all had the joy of 2 a.m. music, loud, you know, wonderful amplified music, and, you know, wanted something done about it, kind of, you know. And so, John, so what does this look like for security and stuff? So is everybody going to be kind of ask for their permits, or are we going to have like, you know, lanyards or something like that, or do we know how far that goes, John?
Again, I haven't given it that much thought because I'm really not changing anything there. Technically, people are supposed to get amplified music permits, and again, I think Megatron's been the one that's handling that recently. And all I'm really suggesting is that she check another box when she's looking at a permit application. I don't want to stop anybody's parties, because we have our own too. But we're really packed in a lot tighter than we used to be, and there's a lot more of those parties. And I guess the best way I can say it is that I was talking to a guy Sunday night near where I camp in Marshalls, who was sitting there kind of half-heartedly plucking his guitar, saying, yeah, I was kind of a little bummed. I brought my guitars hoping to find people to play with, but nobody could find a place where we could hear each other, so we couldn't go out and play. So we kind of have a problem that one style of creativity is choking out another style of creativity. And I want to make sure that we're thoughtful about it and make room for all the types of creativity we have. So
I had one more question.
Okay, I got a couple people who also want to speak too, though. So, and I'll ask if we could be a little concise for trying to stay inside the time. I see, I can't remember if you already spoken, Paxton, and AJ hasn't. Have you spoken yet, or do you want to ask your question or make a statement?
I got a point of clarity. I think, or I don't know if that's the right thing, but I think we ended the meeting.
Yeah, I'm just
it seems as if we're continuing a facilitated board meeting after we ended the meeting. And so I want to be cautious as to if this is a free-flowing just conversation, that we first center the membership voices that are still here in any questions they may have about the new business thing. And then that it is not staying in the same vein as the board meeting.
Yeah.
That this is not seen as an extension of that.
So this is afterwards, and I'm happy to not facilitate. I'm just trying to help keep the conversation moving.
Yeah.
I do think
Yeah.
that any members who wish to speak should be raising their hand, and I hope it's clear that they should do that. We have a few members still here. We're just if any members raise their hand, they'll go first. But since they have not, I'm just trying to make sure we get to the people who are raising their hands. So,
my concern is, does it follow? Are we staying in compliance with bylaws when this is basically a board meeting after a board meeting, because we still have a number of board members here, and we've said to the membership that was here, we've said to them that the board meeting is ended. So I just want us to rethink what we're doing here for just a second to make sure that we are in compliance and doing the right thing here.
So let me.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation we would be having if we were meeting in person after a meeting.
Yeah, I think the idea was my goal, my expectation here was to try and offer space for this conversation. No decisions can be made here. We are still recording it, so it's still available to any membership that wants to watch it. And we announced before the end of the meeting there would be an open discussion afterwards, in order that no one has been hoodwinked about it, if that makes sense. So it's up to you. I'm happy to step by. We can close it. That was why I asked if we wanted to do it.
I just don't think we planned ahead of time. We didn't plan this ahead of time, so I'm a little thrown off, to be honest with you. And so the board had some discussions around having people report or say something on new business issues. We didn't say or have a conversation about dedicating, if we ended the board meeting early, dedicating the rest of the time to conversations about that. And I think that's a broader discussion we needed to have before we just set this in place.
So what would you like to do? I mean,
I would like for us to say thank you, everybody, and good night. And the board can have further discussion on whether we do this kind of thing in the future.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Teresa, give me a call if we're awake during the same hours, which is really minuscule overlap.
All right. Thank you. I agree.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Yeah. It's a
All
good
right.
one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Good meeting.